You want me to say what you're telling about? No, I should. You could do that.
Yes, I have mentioned. Is it recognize your name?
Yeah. All right.
So I'm Diane. This is my husband, Alan.
All right.
Nice to be here tonight.
Okay, we're going to get started, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce once again.
It's not on. It's not on. Is it on?
Your comments be close to it.
Okay,
Yeah, but that one there.
why don't we do this? Good evening, everyone. Everyone on Zoom. Everyone here, please get close. Everyone on Zoom, you can stay where you are. And it's my pleasure to introduce once again
Oh, just you. Okay.
Kobo, Cantor, Jonathan Angress. Let's give him a hand.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. This is more comfortable for me to hold the mic. Can everybody hear me?
Much better.
Okay, great. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for coming back out this evening. I know that it's not normally part of the congregation's custom to come back on Shabbat afternoon, but I appreciate all of you being here. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time and kind of share with you some things, kind of my teaching style, and hopefully, you'll be entertained and learn a little bit this evening. I had prepared two topics this evening because I was told that the class this evening would be family friendly, and so I did have a topic for that. But looking out at the crowd, we do have one young family here, and I think that my other topic can also fit in the same category. So I'm going to begin by asking a question, which of course is the Jewish thing to do all the time, right? And for those who are here this morning, you may have recognized a tune that I did in the Musaf service that's not a typically traditional Jewish tune. Does anybody recall what that was? Yeah, Phantom of the Opera. Music of the Night from Phantom of the Opera. Just by show of hands, who has seen the Phantom of the Opera? Who's familiar with Phantom of the Opera? Okay, so one of the reasons I chose that tune this morning was because I am a huge Broadway person. I was very influenced, I guess, by Broadway and by theater. I did theater in high school and college. I did it a little bit semi-professionally and amateurly as well in New York when I lived in Manhattan for 4 years. And it's something that's very, very close to my heart. I shared last night the impact that Fiddler on the Roof had on my life. And I think that's part of also why Broadway is such a huge part of my life now. What I want to share with you this evening is actually a part of Broadway that hits very close to home, I think, just not for me, but for everybody. And that is the Jewish components, the Jewish influences on Broadway theater. And believe it or not, yes, there's even some Jewish connection to Hamilton that, for those that like Hamilton, that I will share with you soon as well. But there's a book that was published in the 90s that's called, the name of the book is Funny, That Doesn't Sound Jewish. And it explores the Jewish musical influences in Broadway theater, in TV, theme songs, in movie music. And when we think about it, a lot of these writers and composers either themselves were Jewish and maybe had some sort of subconscious memory of hearing something in shul, and then they kind of reformatted it for whatever medium, whatever entertainment they were writing, or they knew somebody who was Jewish who influenced them in some way. And obviously, when we think of Jewish Broadway, what's the show that comes to mind most of the time? Fiddler on the Roof. And we'll talk about Fiddler too, but that's not exactly where I'm going tonight with this topic. One of the best examples I can give of the side-by-side comparison between Broadway music and Jewish music would actually be from a show called Les Mis. Is everybody familiar with Les Mis? Yep. I was in a couple of productions of Les Mis. I played the character of Inspector Javert, and whenever there was dialogue, the whole thing is sung through, it's like an opera, dialogue between Javert and the main character, Jean Valjean, the way the music was written is very specific. It uses very specific notes, very specific rhythms. The first time I did the show, I was in a Jewish day school. The music director came from a family of cantors and Jewish musicians. We were in rehearsal, and she brought me over to her piano, showed me the musical score, and showed me the phrase I was supposed to sing, and said, "Does that look familiar to you?" And I had to think for a minute, and then I realized, wow, this musical phrase from Les Mis was taken from the traditional chant mode for the Passover Seder. Okay? Now, in Passover, the Passover Seder, the song Ma Nishtana, we know the melody most is Ma Nishtana Halayla Hazeh, but that's not the most traditional version of Ma Nishtana. That's the one that we all know because it's popular. But back in Europe and back in the really old times, Ma Nishtana, as well as most of the Seder, was chanted in a very specific mode, and it sounded like this: Ma Nishtana Halayla Hazeh Mikol Halelot. Some of you may have heard that. Okay? In Les Mis, the phrase that the music teacher showed me, "Now bring me prisoner 24601, your time is up and your parole's begun," it's exactly the same as the chant from the Passover Seder. And my jaw dropped when I saw that. I later came to learn the composer of Les Mis is a French Jew. His parents came from Hungary, but he was born in France. He's a French Jew. So maybe he took it from the Seder. I think it's very easy to deduce that. Another example is the show 42nd Street. Everybody remembers 42nd Street. Come and see those dancing feet on the avenue. I'm bringing you to 42nd Street. Amen. Okay, the same chant mode as High Holidays. Okay, similarly, the writers and composers of 42nd Street were Jewish. I mentioned Hamilton before. Have you guys seen Hamilton? You guys like Hamilton? Do you remember who the person is that wrote Hamilton? What? Yeah, Lin-Manuel Miranda. Not a Jew. But I recently learned, and you can find the video on YouTube, that just like I was influenced by Fiddler on the Roof, so was he. He was in a production of Fiddler on the Roof in high school. And he tells a story, actually, that when he got married to his wife, he and his father-in-law and a bunch of people in the wedding party did a very impromptu, kind of flash mob style performance of To Life L'Chaim from Fiddler on the Roof. It's on YouTube, right? Yes, it is on YouTube. And he did that because of the huge influence Fiddler had on Lin-Manuel Miranda. Now, of course, he views it as purely a Broadway show, but I've also seen interviews of him and the book writer from Fiddler, Joseph Stein, talking about the Jewish values of Fiddler, the Jewish values of Broadway, and the kind of universality that exists from Fiddler. There's a story about Fiddler, the two of them talk about, that when Fiddler was first professionally done in Japan, the original creators of Fiddler were there, and during the intermission, there were people that went up to them and said, do the people in the United States understand this show? Because it is so Japanese. We as Jews, we wouldn't think of it that way, would we? We think of Fiddler, oh, that's ours, you know? Every Jewish wedding that I've officiated or that I've been to as a guest, there's been something from Fiddler played, usually sunrise, sunset. You know, it's permeated into popular Jewish culture. And here in Japan, they are identifying with it so heavily, and they are taking Fiddler and making it their own and taking ownership of it as a Japanese function as opposed to a Jewish one. Now, the thing about Fiddler, as Jewish as it is, there are those who believe that the music in Fiddler is kind of parodying itself in a way. Particularly, I have a colleague who is a Yiddish music expert and a klezmer music expert who has mixed feelings about Fiddler, and particularly If I Were a Rich Man. And it's all because of that whole, the whole section, that part, which is supposed to emulate, you know, kind of the nigun without words type of style, or the Hasidic kind of singing and cantorial kind of singing, because the composer, Jerry Bach, and the lyricist, Sheldon Harnick, didn't exactly know how to notate that, how to put that into writing. That kind of style is a little bit of an oral tradition in Judaism. So they didn't know how to put that into writing, so they did the best they could. But then in turn, many of the actors who played Tevye didn't know how to navigate that. Zero Mostel did. Zero Mostel grew up in a religious neighborhood, in a religious household, so he knew, and he would tell them, and he would tell the director, Jerome Robbins, it should go this way, we should do it this way. But then a lot of the actors who followed him, especially in the past 20 years, kind of didn't fully know how to navigate that. One actor who did very well with it, you might know the name Herschel Bernardi. Yes? I've had the very good honor and fortune to become friends with Herschel's son, Michael, who in turn played Tevye in a couple of different productions, including the most recent Broadway revival. And Michael and I actually performed together in a concert that I created back in my other congregation. I take that concert everywhere I go, by the way. So if I do end up here long term, you can expect for that to hopefully happen here as well. But Michael actually gave me a lot of information about Fiddler in that regard, and it gave me a new appreciation of the real Jewishness of Fiddler. It's not just what it's about. It's not just the story. It's not just the songs we all know and love, but the inherent values of Fiddler. The most recent revival happened on Broadway at the height of the refugee crisis from 2015, 2016, from that time period. And what they did in that production was ingenious. We know Fiddler as you come into a theater, on the stage is the house, the show starts, the fiddler appears, Tevye comes out and starts saying his lines. They did that a little differently in the revival. You come out on stage and there's nothing there except for a chair. And hanging on the edge of the chair, on the corner of the chair, is Tevye's hat. The show starts. In walks an actor wearing modern clothing. wearing a big red parka, has a long beard, nothing on his head, and he's reading a book. He's reading the book, and as he's reading, the violin tune, the fiddler tune, starts playing. And the actor reads from the book Tevye's lines. But then as he reads it, he takes off the parka and the Tevye clothing is underneath. And as he says the word tradition, he puts on his hat, the fiddler appears, and then the show officially starts. At the end of the show, 2 hours later, when they're all leaving on a tefka, Tevye's family is left on stage with the cart, and then he comes walking out again with the parka, reading the book. He closes the book. He hugs the book. He then moves into place with the cart, and they walk off stage. This is what in theater is called a framing device. And they chose to do that, Michael told me, as a response to the refugee crisis that was going on at the time. And the whole message behind that was that Tevye's family, of course representing so many Jews from Europe and from all over the world, that end up getting misplaced, that end up becoming refugees. The idea behind that is that as Jews, whether we're born Jewish, whether we became Jewish later on in life, as Jews, we are ultimately refugees. To go full circle, it's also because of that these Jewish tunes snuck their way into Broadway. Another person that comes to mind, Leonard Bernstein. Okay, we pretty much all know who that is. West Side Story. The story about West Side Story was that originally it was going to be called East Side Story, because it was going to be about the Jews in one part of the Lower East Side and the Italian community in the Lower East Side. But it was determined at that time that maybe that's a little too much, especially because Fiddler was then written a little bit later, and so they changed it to West Side Story to make it about whites versus Puerto Ricans. But the whole idea was that it was based off of a Jewish idea and all based off of a Jewish based off of Jewish communities in New York. I'm trying to think of another example musically where, oh yes, it's not exactly a musical example because I don't have the lyrics in front of me and I apologize. Back in 2013, 2014, there was a musical on Broadway, very short-lived, called Soul Doctor. Has anybody heard of this musical? You have, okay. So you might know where I'm going with this. Soul Doctor was a musical that was a biographical musical about and using the music of Shlomo Carlebach. And we all know a lot of Carlebach tunes. They're very upbeat, very catchy. And what this musical was about his life, particularly about his friendship with the jazz singer Nina Simone, as well as kind of his his leaving Europe and coming to the United States and becoming the kind of rock star rabbi that he became. Except the entire musical score is his songs that were then rewritten and rearranged into kind of a Broadway format. One of the producers of the show is actually one of Carlebach's daughters, Neshama Carlebach, who in her own right, she's also a singer and a musician, kind of following in her father's footsteps. I saw this show on Broadway. It was supposed to be open for about a year. It only lasted 3 or 4 months. What's that?
87 performances.
Yeah, so not even 3 months. Not even 3 months, right. The actor who played Shlomo, not Jewish, but he looked exactly like Shlomo. And the way his beard came through and everything, exactly like Shlomo. His voice sounded like Shlomo. It was uncanny. Now, I've never met Shlomo in person, but I've seen enough archival footage, heard enough recordings, and I'm familiar enough with the music to know if it's authentic or not. And there's something special about hearing, taken verbatim in a Jewish context, Jewish music on Broadway. Because, figure this for a moment, you'll sit there in the theater, you'll know exactly what you're hearing. You're hearing a tune for Lecha Dodi. You're hearing a tune for another prayer. But everybody else doesn't realize that's what it is. So that gives you something, a little something extra, something special to hang on to while you are watching the show. And that was a very, very exciting feeling that I had when I sat there and saw that show. At this point, I want to kind of open up a little bit for questions and find out if anybody's curious about anything in regards to kind of the Jewishness of Broadway and anything like that. Yes, sir.
Have you seen Ozzy Schwartz's rendition of "I Don't Know Long" to "I'll Be Back"?
Okay, so and I know Cantor Schwartz personally. Yes, I have many times. In fact, the most recent bat mitzvah that I officiated in my previous congregation, that student was obsessed with Hamilton, and in the very first bat mitzvah lesson said, because she knew that I always let the students choose which tune for Adon Olam they want to do at their bar and bat mitzvah. And she right away said, this is the one that I want to do. And I said to her, I said, okay, great, let's do it. And she already taught it to herself. She knew it before we started studying together. And I said, let's do it, except that I'm not familiar with the music of Hamilton that much, so I need to learn it. She helped teach it to me. I also got the music from Cantor Schwartz as well. But, and so we did that. Yes, absolutely. It goes both ways, not only as evidenced this morning and with the video you're talking about, not only does the music, the Jewish music influence Broadway, but it can come full circle, that Broadway music can find its way into Jewish contexts as well.
Can you give an example of how Broadway music influenced Jewish prayer?
Well, I did this morning during the service. In part of Musaf, I sang Mimkomo to Music of the Night. I don't want to give too much away in regards to examples because I don't want to kind of, spoil the novelty of it. But if I have the opportunity to return back here to Albuquerque, I promise you will hear plenty of it.
As a follow-up, Cantor, would you say that, are there Jewish nigunim that were influenced by non-Jewish music from Europe?
Absolutely. There was a cantor in the early 20th century, lived actually through until the 50s or 60s, by the name of Moshe Oisher. I don't know if anybody's heard that name. Yes. And Moshe Oisher was known, like his trademark was to chant the prayers in what they called a modern style. He was influenced by the jazz and theater music of the time period, which of course is not the same as the jazz and theater music of now. But I'll give an example of that. Going back to Passover for a second, the very end of Passover, Chad Gad Yah, we know the normal tune, Chad Gad Yah, Chad Gad Yah. That's not what Moshe Oisher did. Moshe Oisher did this wild, and I'll demonstrate it for a minute, but he went, he would do that kind of stuff. And it was, what was that? Scatting, yes, which came from, the jazz and theater music of the early to mid 20th century.
Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Does traditional chazanut still have any influence in the musical world outside of Orthodox synagogues?
Does traditional chazanut have any influence in the outside world other than in Orthodox synagogues? Are you saying in terms of musical influences or just, okay. I think we would be hard pressed to find a current day example. But there is another little bit of a story that I can tell you. And this is actually, I'm sharing this now also based off of the table conversation that those I was sitting at the table with a few minutes ago we were having. I had a friend when I was in Cantor school whose family came from Baltimore. Or rather, her parents came from Baltimore, but her grandparents came from, I'm trying to remember the exact city, and I can't I want to say Memphis. And it was a religious family, an Orthodox family. The grandparents lived in an apartment building, and of course, Shabbat was sometimes a challenge, living multiple floors up and stuff like that. They had a neighbor who was a young man who sometimes would be the Shabbos boy for them. I try not to use that term too much because it's not so kosher now and relevant, but for those that don't know what that is, it's a non-Jewish person who has an arrangement with a Jewish family to turn on a light or do something that's not Shabbat appropriate in a religious family, and in turn, after Shabbat, they'll get paid for it, or will be given some food or something like that. And what this family gave this young man as a thank you when they moved away for helping them on Shabbat was a record, an old school record of cantorial music, specifically from Yosel Rosenblatt. Later on, we came to learn that this young man became a very well-known and prolific musician. And I know that when I've listened to this person's music with my family, my father would point out to me, oh, that sounded like chazanut. That sounded Jewish. That had a little of a Jewish flavor to it. This young man, who was the neighbor of my friend's grandparents, was Elvis Presley.
Oh my gosh.
So if my friend and their family are telling the truth, then I can give that definitive proof that yes, there was a direct cantorial influence into Elvis's music. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Okay, other questions? Other questions from this side of the room, maybe? Have you guys seen a Broadway show before, besides Hamilton? Which ones? The Lion King and Aladdin. Okay, did you see Aladdin in New York?
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago, okay. So then you saw a different actor playing Jafar, but up until recently, the actor playing Jafar in New York is the same person who did the voice in the movie. Did you like it? Yeah. Did you like Lion King too? Which one did you like better?
Aladdin.
You liked Aladdin better? So I'm going to tell you a little secret. I saw Aladdin before it officially opened, because I had a friend from college who was performing in Aladdin. They needed people to come. They do previews. Broadway does previews. So they needed people to come to see the show and then fill out, some information afterwards to for them to decide, do they need to change anything at the last minute and stuff like that. So about a month before Aladdin officially opened, I went to a performance to see it, and that's the only time that I've seen it. So, okay, I'm glad you had fun. And this, did you see the same shows too?
I haven't seen Lion, but I saw Lion.
Okay, what did you think of Lion King? Yeah. Have you seen any other shows besides that, or that's it? Hamilton was on TV? On Disney Plus, yeah.
I didn't, that's the only thing I can.
Okay. Okay, cool, cool. Any other questions? Yes?
What I recall hearing a number of years ago is that a number of the tunes that Jews sing, say at Friday Night Dinner or Shalashudis, come from old German drinking songs. Do you know anything about this?
Yes. So, okay, so I just want to clarify that it's not every single tune, it's not every single, table song or prayer or whatever that we sing. But there are some melodies that, just like how theater melodies kind of crept into Jewish prayer, same thing, folk tunes from different countries, different time periods, different areas also kind of crept into services too. And some of those were German folk tunes that were traditionally drinking songs. So here, I'm actually going to ask you guys for help with this. They're about to. Okay, so you guys know the prayer Ein Keloheinu, right? Which tune do you guys know for Ein Keloheinu? The normal one. Sorry, I stepped outside of the view of the camera. Yeah. Okay, so which one is that? Can you sing it for a second? Right. Okay, so that one. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadoneinu. German drinking song. What about Adon Olam? What tune do you know for Adon Olam?
I don't really have like one that I.
You have multiple, right? Okay, any other ones?
Like,
Okay, have you heard the one Adon Olam Asher Malach? German drinking tune.
The one we did this morning is also a German drinking tune.
The one we did this morning? The Adon Olam, you mean?
The one with the repetition in it.
Right. I didn't realize that was I always learned that the one that I just demonstrated, which is like the traditional one, is a German drinking tune. Definitely the Ein Keloheinu is as well.
When my dad was stationed in Germany, it was very popular at one of the local taverns.
Oh, where in Germany?
Stuttgart, Rhein-Main, Wiesbaden, Tempelhof.
Everywhere.
I didn't see the United States stores, but
Okay. My grandmother on my dad's side is both my grandparents on my dad's side were from Germany. So there's German Jewish descent in my family as well. So okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So this is going to be completely off target or segue. You talked today about loving the choir and being very open to the choir. So I don't know if that was only on Friday. So I'm wondering, are you going to be teaching the choir different Jewish songs with Broadway harmonies and stuff?
Mm-hmm. If we're lucky enough to reestablish a choir here, and like I mentioned, if it's something the congregation wants and the leadership wants and everybody is on board with it, then the sky is kind of the limit when it comes to what music we would do. And so absolutely, doing something that is either using a tune from Broadway or even something that is considered 100% Jewish music, but is influenced by the Broadway style. There's some, cantors nowadays that write music in that style. Yeah, I don't see why not. If the choir wants to tackle that and definitely sink their teeth into it, Why would I stop you? Yes.
Other than violin and guitar, what instruments do you like?
Other than violin and guitar, those are my main instruments. I can play a little bit of piano, but very, very basic piano. And I can play, I can play a tiny bit of mandolin because the strings on a mandolin are the same as the strings on a violin. And the tuning is exactly the same. So it's a little easy to do. And I also play the kazoo. Do you play instruments? What do you play?
I'm deciding on
What are you deciding on? What are you thinking about?
clarinet, saxophone, maybe, a little bit of it.
Okay.
School band is a start.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. I'm temporarily helping out with a school band, teaching a school band down the street from where we live currently. So we can talk a little bit more afterwards if you want after Havdalah, but my recommendation would be the flute because from a reading music standpoint, that's the easiest one. Okay. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask about why you think that. You don't have to answer.
Why I think what?
Why is flute the easiest?
I think,
It's a little complicated. We can talk afterwards. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Lots to do with our community and our congregation, which has very limited office staff.
Mm-hmm.
We have one wonderful employee, and as far as administrative duties, what how you feel about that, you're supposed to do it.
Well, I would have to learn what the current administrative protocols are of the office and of the congregation and what the administrative needs would be of the congregation before I could give an exact detailed answer. But I do understand that it's a very limited staff here at the congregation. That's actually something that I prefer because oftentimes it can be more efficient and it can be easier to work with. I very much like for my own work to do things as efficiently as possible and on my own, as well as being a team player. So from what's been described to me, from what I've seen, it's actually a little bit more of an ideal situation for me. By the way, I don't mind the questions that are off topic, but when I offered for questions, I was thinking more in regards to the Jewish Broadway stuff. But whatever you want to ask, go ahead. It's okay.
Have you noticed any Jewish influences in Sondheim? And whether it was early Sondheim or later Sondheim?
Not necessarily later Sondheim, because that's kind of more of Sondheim's signature. One could make an argument about a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum in regards to the musical style in that show, because that's definitely early Sondheim. And I think part of that also had to do with the fact that Zero Mostel was the lead character in that show as well. Whether the Mostel family and whether Zero Mostel himself wanted to admit it or not, his Jewishness definitely came through everything he did. But Sondheim, I have heard through the Broadway grapevine, so to say, that Sondheim wasn't exactly so fond of his Jewish upbringing and so fond of his Jewishness. I think he had, what I had heard is he had a kind of a negative bar mitzvah experience, and that kind of turned him off a little bit. So I don't know exactly if I've never heard too many Jewish influences in his stuff. Like I said, the closest thing would be Forum.
And what about Jonathan Larson? Jonathan Larson got his start writing musicals for his local synagogue in White Plains. Did that carry over into Tick, Tick, Boom, or Rent?
So in Rent, and I'm trying to remember the name of the song, and I can't remember it right now, but there is a song in Rent that it's considered a quintet, like a vocal quintet. It's not in the traditional sense because Rent is a very modern show. But lyric-wise, not musically in terms of the tune, but lyric-wise, this quintet uses the text of the Kaddish in Hebrew in this song. It's very hidden, and it's very you have to really focus and listen to it because it's kind of almost like background noise.
What's the name of the song?
I can't remember the name of the song.
La Vie Bohème too.
That's it. Thank you.
What is it?
La Vie Bohème.
It's the beginning of the second act.
Yeah. That's the only thing that would come to mind. I'm not as familiar with Jonathan Larson's material to further talk about that. Yes.
I have a question. I don't, just picking your brain.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many now classic Christmas carols that were written by Jewish composers.
Oh, yeah.
How come they haven't come up? I mean, how come there are not those great songs for the Jewish person? Hanukkah, yeah.
So there actually are. There are, and it's funny you mention that because yes, I mean Irving Berlin, writing White Christmas is obviously a huge example of that. But then there's also on the Jewish side of things, there are I don't want to call them Hanukkah carols per se. I wouldn't do that, but definitely Hanukkah songs that are outside the traditional norm of Hanukkah music that we know. There's one, for example, I think it's called "Let There Be Light" or "Be Light" or something like that. That was written by the same composer who wrote Godspell and Wicked, Stephen Schwartz. And he specifically wrote this song about Let There Be Light as a Hanukkah song. Similarly, a lot of people, even though this is not Broadway per se, the song Light One Candle from Peter, Paul, and Mary can fall in that same category. In terms of, lack of better words, secular Hanukkah songs, if you want to call it that. Yes, Harvey.
Pete Seeger, that whole album.
What's that?
Pete Seeger.
Pete Seeger. Yes, that's right. Whole album. Yes.
Will you comment on what I've heard referred to as camp music? I'm thinking like Debbie Friedman
Mm-hmm.
and some of
Carl Tubman.
the very contemporary people who are writing that kind of thing.
Ask them. Do you guys go to Camp Ramah? No? But, oh, you went to BBYO, so it's the same kind of stuff that's done. Debbie Friedman already is actually probably in the Jewish camp world considered too traditional at this point. I would say that Rick Recht, Craig Taubman, even that's pushing whether it's too traditional or not. There are so many new Jewish composers and songwriters that are writing Jewish music, and it's not all, with English and things like that. It's actually tunes and melodies that are written to sing, but also be played on the guitar, played on the piano, or played with a band for the Jewish liturgy. And a lot of those Jewish musicians that are writing that music also over the summers work at the camps. They are the service leaders. They are the song leaders at the camps. And so, of course, they're going to use a lot of their own music to teach it to, 1,000 young Jewish kids in Jewish camp. And then what happens is that they come back to their communities and they want to hear that, in the community as well. I believe somebody had asked that question earlier this morning. about doing like a Ruach Shabbat kind of thing, using the melodies that the kids are familiar with and letting them participate and letting them be part of it. You know, I will be honest with everybody that, you know, if a gun was put to my head and I had to choose between that and more traditional music, I would probably choose more traditional music, but it does not mean that I am against the camp music. I just think that there is a time and a place for it. And if it is something that can span the entire generational gap, then I'll use it. If not, then I will still use it, but I'll use it for the groups that it's appropriate for and the time and the place that it's appropriate for. Yeah. Yes.
Daniel Kahn.
What's that?
Daniel Kahn.
Daniel Kahn. I'm not familiar.
Daniel Kahn is leading the revival of Yiddish music.
Mm.
Based in Germany, and he's translated many of Leonard Cohen's songs into Yiddish. He's a tremendous singer. He just put out a new CD.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful.
And that's,
He does a wonderful rendition of Hallelujah.
That's right.
Right. Right. And speaking of Leonard Cohen as well, not just the famous Hallelujah that we all know. Some people, you know it from the original album. Some people have seen it at concert, and some people have seen it in the movie Shrek. It's okay.
This is Shrek.
Yes, it was used in Shrek. Yes. And but Leonard Cohen also wrote a song called Not by Power. Thank you. And it is basically using the Who by Fire. Thank you. Yes, thank you. That's it. Right, Unatana Tokef. It's using the High Holiday Liturgy from Unatana Tokef and Barosh Hashanah as the textual basis. And in fact, a couple of years ago in my former congregation, I used the Who by Fire melody for that section of Unatana Tokef where the text was taken from during services. Yes?
Are you familiar with Michael Seidel?
I have heard the name. I am not as familiar maybe as I should be.
Okay, so we've had him come and officiate. He's a professional musician.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a cantor, nor is he a rabbi, but he can certainly lead services. So I guess one question would be, would you be willing to share the pulpit with somebody like that?
I would be willing to have him come, as a guest every once in a while. I think that's a discussion, that if I do end up here, that with the lay leadership we would have to figure out. It would have to it would be based on what sharing the pulpit looks like and what that entails and what that means. I'm open to it, but let's have a discussion about it.
What's the other one? Rabbi Gardner from East Spring. Is that Warshawski?
I know Josh. I know Chava too.
Josh Warshawski did a lot of my stuff.
Yeah, I tutored Josh in High Holiday Nosach because he took some classes with the Cantor school and asked me to help him. So I know Josh, yes.
Josh.
Warshawski.
Oh.
Do you know Cantor Josh Broman?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
He was the cantor for many years.
Yes, I have not spoken to him, so don't worry about that. But I do know him at least peripherally. I also saw a poster out in the hallway somewhere that you're having Joey Weissenberg come tomorrow. Oh, he'll be here tomorrow. I might run into him. I had a student pulpit in New York City at a congregation called Or Zarua back in my first year of Cantor school. And so I came to lead services and do like Sunday musical programs for the congregation. And Joey was doing music in the Hebrew school at the same time. So he and I have also kind of crossed paths before.
He'll be at the JCC tomorrow, 3 to 5.
Oh, okay. I might go over and say hi. Okay, any other questions?
Are you, Cantor, are you familiar with the writers of Shrek? I believe they are Jewish. And there are some Jewish themes in Shrek, as well as the name Shrek itself being Yiddish. Are you familiar with that?
I did not know that. I mean, I knew Shrek is Yiddish, but I did not know that the writers of Shrek, I don't know who they are, so I didn't know that they were Jewish, but that's good to know. Thank you.
I'll ask a not so musical question.
Sure.
Maybe you're responsible for the music. So Friday night services, at least when I leave, maybe it's higher attendance when Jonas leaves, are not like last night. So,
Okay.
Last night was wonderful and beautiful, and I would love to see that many people there every Friday. So that being said, besides occasional use of the guitar, because I assume that would not be every week, maybe it would, you can comment on that. What other ideas would you have? Would you be open to doing at a park, outside, in the back, in the sukkah? You know, what other ideas do you have to bring people into the building for Friday night services?
Yes, yes, and yes. So first of all, let me comment on the guitar. I did use the guitar last night just as a way to show the community what I am able to do. And you know, definitely if we would, let's say, designate once a month or something a Shabbat Unplugged, or you know, something like that, where it would be with that type of style with the guitar. It's not 100% my favorite thing to do. You know, I wanted to show also the kind of more standard way that I do the service. That's why I put the guitar down halfway through. But I also am a firm believer that, you know, while it's wonderful to have services here in the building, it's not always the most necessary thing, especially if we need to engage people on the outside and who might have trepidation about coming to the building or coming to a shul building. Not saying that they would, but they might. And so doing it in a park, doing it at another location, or doing it even at somebody's home, you know, when there's a dinner to follow or something like that. I am open to all those ideas. And, you know, during Sukkot, doing it in the sukkah, things like that. Absolutely, yes.
For several years, we've been Shabbat out.
Mhm.
Just a couple of times.
Okay, wonderful. If I'm not used to the elevation now, I'll have to definitely get used to it up there, right?
Little higher.
Yeah.
Only 10,000 feet more.
Yes.
Be open to maybe doing like once a month, Shabbat evening Mincha and Havdalah. I grew up Orthodox, and that's one of the things I do now is Mincha and Havdalah with the community.
Right. I mean, I'm open to anything. I think that would, you know, definitely be a discussion with the ritual committee and possibly with the board. You know, obviously the only way to do that is to make sure we have enough people to come and support it. And I would obviously want to learn the history of, you know, what the current custom is in regards to that. But, you know, I'm open to ideas. I'm open to anything, but I also want to remain, you know, respectful to the needs of the congregation and to what the current setup is, and the current, you know, what they call the minhag hamakom, the custom of the place. So I want to be sensitive to that. If there aren't any other questions, then I think we are ready to do Havdalah then. And one of the people I was going to ask to help with Havdalah walked away.
She'll be back.
Okay.
She may have left because she got burnt last week. The wax, but we'll get her back. She didn't really.
Okay. Well, if she doesn't want to hold the candle, that's okay. She can hold one of the other items. Maybe you can help with the candle. Okay. So you want to come up here? Yes.
Just one more question. I'm not a member of this synagogue. I have 3 young children. And a different synagogue that I'm looking for not only having my children engage with Judaism as Sunday Hebrew school, but at Friday and Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure I got here later, so sorry.
No, it's okay.
But I want to know about your use of how to engage your children 7 years old, 8 years old in the tradition.
Right.
That's, I didn't grow up going Hebrew school, I grew up going just at a shul.
Right. So just real quick, and then we'll start Havdalah. You weren't the only person to ask that question, and wow, hold on. It's like at the Oscars when they play the music when you talk too much, right?
Usually you turn off.
What's your name, sir? Gabriel. Let's chat when we're done, okay?
Usually we turn off the lights after we light the candles.
Okay.
Just for your information, Shlomo Carlebach came here to Albuquerque. So
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah. You get to hold this one today. Who wants to hold the cup? Okay. And I guess you got the
Who wants the fire?
Wait, I want
The fire?
Let me get the fire.
Oh, he said that I got.
It's my furniture. I thought it was candles. I forgot they were like
The whole thing or just
Okay. Here you are. Okay, and if you are able to rise, please do so. If not, then that's okay too. הנה אל ישועתי אפתח ולא אפחד, כי עוזי וזמרתיה, אדוני ויהי לי לישועה. ושבתם מים בששון ממענה הישועה, לאדוני הישועה למחבקתך סלה, אדוני צבאות עמנו משגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלה. אדוני צבאות אשר אדם פותח בך, אדוני הושיע, המלך יעננו ביום קוראנו. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. כן תהיה לנו כוס ישועות עשה בשם אדוני אקרא. לי 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen Lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim Lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh Lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. Baruch Ata Adonai Hamavdil Ben Kodesh Lechol. Lai 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 Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera Beyameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Shavua Tov, 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 Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov, everyone. Can everyone just please not move yet until we get the lights back on? Please.
It's on the other side. Look at it.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Shavua Tov, everyone, and those who joined us online as well. Shavua Tov to you. And have a good week, a safe week, a healthy week, and a happy week.
See you everybody tomorrow, 5:30. Don't so excited. 5:30. Be on time, please. Oh, God. Otherwise you'll suffer the glare. And also.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. I'm not trying to rush you, but I just put it away so I want to go get it for you. So see you tomorrow. Yes. We're having
But let's
talk very- at 5:30. Yes.
The board has to be here at 9 o'clock.
Oh, yeah, you guys-
Board at 9 o'clock. You're on the board, 9 o'clock. 11 o'clock, religious school meets with the Cantor. 12 o'clock, Q&A with the religious school parents. I'll be happy to repeat it if anybody wants to hear it.
I enjoyed our